To the Hershey-Derry Township Historical Society. As many of you know, if you've been to our programs before, we typically host them on a Thursday evening. This time, due to the needs of our guest speaker today, Tom Memmi, we had to amend this for a Saturday afternoon. In light of the weather conditions that we had last night, certainly it's a good thing because it's the middle of the day and I see that we have a nice packed house. I just want to mention a few things. My name is Nikki Soliday. I'm the Executive Director of the Historical Society. As you know, we run these programs typically October through May. Sometimes you have to check our website or look on our newsletter for amendments to times, dates, and locations. Again, this is a very special presentation that we've been looking forward to having, thanks to our guest, Tom Memmi, who was also the guest author of the most recent article in our newsletter, January, February. The follow-up to that article will be in our March, April newsletter, so I would suggest if you're not a member and you'd like to read those articles, sign up for membership today. This will be a great opportunity to join and find out about all the events that we offer. At the close of the program, if you'd like to pick up a sample newsletter, there's some on the back table. As well, I will have blue contact information cards. That gives us an opportunity to get your contact information and keep you up to date on our calendar of events, special programs and features, and guest speakers like Tom. I'd like to introduce Tom at this point in time. He's been a volunteer for the Society for many years. You've possibly seen his articles before. He's done programs for us on the history of the state police. He's a very well-known local community member, and he will explain his association with the Hershey Factory as he presents his program. Tom?
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, as she said, I've been a volunteer Historical Society for a while. I'm also the historian for the Pennsylvania State Police Museum. And I've worked at the plant. I'm still there at the old factory. I've been there about 6 years. And I was there when they were in full production, and then as things slowed down. And I didn't know a lot. In fact, I lived on Java Avenue for about over 20 years. That was 2 blocks away from the factory. And I was never in the place as a kid. I walked by it, and I didn't know much about it until I finally started working there. And then I just started asking people questions. I say, how old is this building? What did they used to do there? Most of them, I don't know. That's what they do now. I have no idea, and I was just curious. I mean, the place has a lot of character to it. If you've ever been there or worked there, you can realize that. So I just started doing research and trying to collect information. And I collected different image photos and other research material. So what I'm going to do today is show you some of the stuff that I've collected. So by the way, this is my daughter Angelina, and she's going to be moving the slide for us today. You probably won't be able to see the numbers. These are building numbers at the back. But anyway, we had the original plant, and which is basically one-story buildings, and they cover in a certain area, I think 6 to 8 acres. But so what I did was I took the current plant that exists. I'm going to use this. That's the current plant factory. Here's Chocolate Avenue down here. Here's your Hershey cocoa bushes. But the black boundaries or lines, that is the current factory. And the red indicates the original factory. You can see how small it is compared to the current one. It's not exactly the scale, but it's pretty close. And then I had the numbers. Buildings are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 16, 18, and then that was another thing I had when I started working on it. The buildings were numbered. 41, 23. What's the numbering about? Yeah. Oh, I think that's the year it was built. It didn't always coincide. In fact, even some of the top managers in the plant would give people tours, and they would say, "This year it was built." That can't be right. So what I did is I found when I view back to the original 1905 plan layout, then you see it. There's the 1, 2, 3, 4, and everything makes sense. Your earliest part of production starts here. That probably was the receiving and storage for cocoa beans and other materials, and it just progressed through all the way to finishing and wrapping, and then out to shipping. And then the original track, or siding, track number 1 ran here. It's not there anymore. They tore it up And they added building 23 is still there. It has a curvature to it, so that's the curvature of the siding. So, want to progress there, Ange? Thank you, sweetie. This is the next photo. It shows the factory of maybe 1906, 1907, something like that. Now, with this particular image, you see the top and the bottom. That's C. Emblem Urban. He was the original designer. He was a friend of M.S. Hershey's from Lancaster. They belonged to a club in Lancaster, and C stood for Cassius. Cassius Emblem Urban. Not only did he set up the factory, designed the building, he helped lay out the town. But on this image, the bottom and the top came from, I got that at the plant. They have the old blueprints over there. They're still in the factory. These are from 1903. This section I cropped out. And the bottom, you notice, it says Hershey Chocolate Company. It doesn't say Hershey, it says Derry Church on the bottom. And as far as I know, those blueprints are still over at the plant, and Lisa Sherrod and I were trying to hopefully get them, save them, but they're one of the buildings, the old engineering building. All right, thank you. One of the things that I noticed when I was a kid walking up and down Chocolate Avenue, there was this raised or protruding section of wall, and I couldn't figure it out. It didn't make any sense. It's a foundation wall, but it sticks out, and if you fall on it only goes so far, and it comes to here. And the rest of the foundation wall goes flush with the surface of the building. And by looking at plans, that appears to be the location right at the end of that, right down there, where the factory ended, the original factory. So so if you ever go down there, you can see how far it went. Then that's the eastern end on Chocolate Avenue, and then we'll go up to the western end. Okay, sweetie, next slide. And there we go. Here's another image. See here, that's building 24. That was built in 1908. Building. There's building 25. These are basically identical. They're just sitting on different angles. And you notice there's no Homestead Road. Yeah, because you got Java Avenue went on a curve. Because the trolley curved. It couldn't make a right-hand turn. It had to go on a curve. So that's building 31, and that's the old milk receiving building. This little building, this little short section here. They kind of saved the old milk receiving building. That's why they built this short. And they tore this down. They built building 35 on the end. You see 1, 2, 3 smokestacks. Angie, go back. Can you go back to the previous slide, sweetie? Another one. That's the original powerhouse, and you see the 2 smokestacks that were built. And I'll get into powerhouses later. But apparently, when they broke ground in 1903, when they got the first, and they actually got the first chimney built, apparently a wife of one of the workers took a ladder. These are 155 feet high. Took up the ladder, put the last brick in, and put a flag on top. So you're going to skip to the next one. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. It's kind of a blurry image. This photo is about a year old. It's up in, this is building 25. It's the runs along Chocolate Avenue. It's a tall building at the east end. And in the reflections mailing, there was a section there about there was a fire in the factory. And I actually learned about this when I was a kid living on Java Avenue. A neighbor of mine, his name was George Girth. And that was back in the 70s, and he's like in his 80s, so he's been around for a while, and he was originally from Lancaster. And he used to pass on stories to my dad, which he passed on to me. He claimed he's one of the surveyors in the town, and he had a lot of experiences here early on with the factory. And he told my dad there was a fire, so I started doing some research, and I found out there was a fire. a large fire. On the top floor, that's the 4th floor of building 25. I'm not sure how it started. It was pretty substantial. And I walked up there. I couldn't see any damage in the concrete. It could have been, I don't know. I spoke with Neil Fosnot prior to my presentation. He said you can look up top and you might be able to see some darkened stone or carbon. And that's 1918. That was February 1918. Hershey Fire Department responded. Lebanon Fire Department responded to the fire. Damage 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, something like that. And then I read that, I don't know if it would happen today with an actual fire, but the top guys like Uri went there, John Snyder, they went up to the fire because they had a really vested interest in the place. So, and that's what. And they used to have initially they had cocoa powder. I think at the time of the fire, and the last thing they had stored there before they cleared it out was bags of cocoa powder. Coincidentally. We're back at the east end of the plant. You don't have to memorize these numbers, there's no test. And that's building 25, building 24. This is about 1919. And they're constructing, which became the central shop. This is the engineering building, this is the design equipment. It's in there. The building's still there. And this is the central shop. And they're constructing that. This is all out of reinforced concrete. And if you look at old images, you see these of the factory or other buildings in town. When they're building them, you see these towers. And there's an elevator in there, and concrete would go up in that elevator. And that's how they would get it up high. They could feed it to different locations. Now I see a chute. There's a going down here, and in this building, I can't figure out why, unless it makes a turn, it goes down in here. But they were used to move concrete at the plant, so they could get it high up to build the tall buildings. Next slide, sweetie. This is actually a lathe that was just sold in auction. I don't know how much it went for. This is a Monarch lathe that is a manufacturer. They had several of these. It's in the central shop. It was in the central shop. And I was told, and I checked the plate on, they are from the 40s. I was told that these were given to the Hershey Chocolate Corporation as a thank you from the government from World War II for making firing pins in the machine shop. So that's, someone got that at an auction. It's a great machine, and they probably got a good deal on it. So most of that stuff went out. This is another image in the central shop. Again, this is at the east end of the plant. It's like a 2-story structure. That's a crane that runs the length of the building. It's a 10-ton crane. That's a small one. That's one of the small ones they have in the plant. Next slide, sweetie. And that's the roof of the central shop. Well, I have it shown like this. This is what they call a monitor-style roof, where the central section is actually raised, and then along here there's like steel I-beams, and those allow that crane to roll up and down the length of the building so they can move heavy equipment. So that space up top allows for the crane to move, gives it space, gives it room, and also get extra windows for lighting. Okay, sweetie? That's a blacksmith forge. And that image is probably like 5 months old. They had a blacksmith there in the central shop. And that's the forge, and over to the left, it's not in the picture, they had a coal bin where the coal was dropped off. And there's a sliding door, they slide the door up, bring the coal over, and they shove it over, move it over to the forge. And then there's some of the blacksmith tools. And to the right of that, I don't have a picture of it, was a hammer, a steam-powered hammer that was slammed down on the metal. It was fabricated, and I was told after it ran on steam, and then they converted it to ran off air pressure from a compressor. Next slide. This is also the central shop. That's a pit. I don't know if I was told, I don't know if it's true, because I couldn't find any remnants of tracks. They might have worked on trolley cars in there, but what they most likely did was work on trucks and vehicles belonging to the Hershey Corporation. And these panels lift up, and you can just climb down there and work underneath. because you know, you have a big truck or something like that, and you won't be able to sort of put on a hoist, so it's easy to just climb down the pit. And I had one of the guys in the shop, he took one of the smaller crane, he lifted it up for me so I could take an image of that. Okay? And that's just standing on the roof of the central shop looking north. And it's building 24, you can see all the limestone, all the work that they put into it. You know, with the original building, there wasn't a town here, so you have no electricity, and I mean, that must have been a heck of a job. I mean, I read about them working at night, using lanterns to see by. You know. Next slide, please. There's a pretty nice image. This is neat because you can see there's Java Avenue used to curve because of the trolley. And they just ran Homestead Road straight out, didn't like that before. And you see those are foundations or basements of homes that they're tearing up. And there's the old car barn, like the East End barn. I think it held like 16 cars. And that's what they call the South parking lot now. They kept tearing homes down and tearing homes, so for the factory workers in World War. And there's some silos over there. They were built around 1950. They built the original 16, and then in 57 they added 8 more to store their cocoa beans. And that's a little stairwell that runs outside. And there's the central shop here, building 25, building 24, powerhouse, old milk receiving building. Okay, sweetie. Thank you. Here's an image you won't see from out in the street going by. It's just, you have to be up on the roof to see that. That's taken from inside on a roof. It was on building 33. That's building 40. That was built in the 30s. There's storage and shipping in there, and that's building, it's kind of ugly. That was built right after World War II. That's building 44. Last thing they did in there was processed syrup. You see the smokestacks. Next slide. That's building 40. You see the water tower. And you see how ornate they were. They took their time and took pride in it. Next slide. And that's taken on top of building 33. It's a huge surface. You can put like a miniature golf course up there. At least you could have, because that's one of the buildings they just tore down. This is the roof of it. There's your water tower, silos, building 44, syrup building. Next slide. And that's standing at the same spot now, turning around. So see how nice it is in the summertime. We missed that. Next slide. This is another space or cavity that you see in between buildings over there. It's a tight space. You see this here. That's actually a broken. Luckily, there's a broken window. I took an image out to the broken window of that. That's 29, 33. But these these concrete basins were used for cooling. They held water. Part of this. At least that's what I was told, part of the system. And that's building 40 over there, the water tower is. And you can see that they just tore this down. There was a remnant of some building, I don't know what it was. You see the outline of it, which they built on top of. And there's the old original windows, arched windows. But that stuff's gone. Okay, next slide. There's just another one of those spaces in between. You wouldn't see from the outside.
Well, rail cars went right out the middle there.
That's exactly, yep. That's right, that would have been, was that track 8, track number 8 of siding. That's what the space was for. You're correct. That's the space in between building for track sidings that would come in, and sometimes they would fill those in up above. They would actually put connectors and put floors in, and they place some enclosure over the tracks. Next slide. There's a nice one. I like that one because of that's the sunset, and they're on the water tower, and kissing tower.
Some of these water towers?
That particular one is there. It's still there. They use that. It's used for cooling for the air conditioning equipment in the existing building. I asked different people, so what's going on? They're going to keep this or whatever. They're not sure. They keep going around. They're going to get a water bladder to hold the water for the system, or they're going to move this water tank or another one. I don't know. We'll have to see. Next slide. I took that. That was taken on top of building 44. That's the tallest building up there. I thought I was afraid of heights, but apparently not. It helped me. But anyway, you see that's the Hershey corporate headquarters on the hill. Smokestacks. That's the old water, the milk processing water tank. Okay, sweetie, next slide. This is, doesn't matter, 24, building 29. But anyway, you see, if you look along here, this is inside, obviously, there's a roof. But if you look along, you look on here and here, those are actually, used to be exterior walls. And there was a track that ran, that was track 7, number 7, I think it was. That ran in there, track 7 or 8. But anyway, what they did was, just to create a building, they slapped two walls on either end and put a roof on top. And that became building 32. If you look down there, there's an old crane. And this has, again, this has that monitor style roof. We have the raised section on top. Right up there, there's the windows. There's actually a catwalk that goes a whole, that's old wood. I wouldn't walk across that, but you're pretty high up at this point. Next slide. This is, or was in, or is in the, they call it the carpenter shop. The last location is the carpenter shop. And that's the first floor of building 29. So I'm standing in the doorway taking this photo, and you see that's the other door of that building. If you go on look on the plans, the original plans, this section, this room, if you want to call it, is exactly where building 1 was. If you see it's the same outline, same exact wall location. Because when they would add on to the factory, they would tear some of the old plant down. And so they had to fit like a puzzle. They had to fit the new buildings into the old ones. So you can tell, and actually this building 29 incorporated some of the original buildings. So behind these masonry walls, there could be the original stone walls of building 1. And you see these are the columns. They're everywhere on the plant. And it's they use reinforced concrete. In the columns, which go up and down vertically, and you have your beams. Some are steel, but some are concrete. And they're reinforced concrete. And it was Colonel John Wickersham. We heard of Emblem, Urban, who did a lot of the work. But Colonel Wickersham's company out of Lancaster did a lot of the other work. In fact, I think they did the Giant Center here in Hershey. They're still around. His business is still around. But his big thing was reinforced concrete. And it was kind of, back in 1908, 1909, that was kind of a new thing. But he believed in it, and so did M.S. Hershey, and so a lot of that plan is reinforced concrete. Concrete is sand, you have your stone, you have your cement, and initially you have your water, but there's rebar, reinforcing bar. It strengthens the concrete and gives it a greater flexibility so it doesn't crack. Next slide. That's the main hallway. I waited too long. Well, there was a wooden floor that ran the whole length of this hallway. And I don't know if it was important towards the end, but initially the main hallway, which is where it was originally, was a central spine. It was an important, any place, you could, in the original main hallway, any building had to go to, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything was off this main hallway. Next slide. That's at the east end. The reason I put this slide in here is because the original hallway was this wide. And when they built building 29, they enlarged the hallway. Because you walk down the hallway and there's this partition wall. It doesn't make any sense. And again, I asked people and they just shrug their shoulders. They're not sure why. But doing some research, you find out that was the original width of the hallway. Or just length of the width of the wide case. That's actually under the main hallway. Yeah, you can get down, you have to crouch down. You can't stand up. There's not that much space. I know it's hard to see. This is in the main hallway of the plant. And you see the these are the arched brick ceilings they have in there. Now, I see it's reinforced with steel. I don't know if that was, I doubt that was the original. They might have had timbers in there at one time. But I mean, these huge forklift trucks go up and down this hallway on top of that. They don't move, so they must know what they were doing. That's a slide of on the blueprint from 1903. Shows the window styles they use in the plant, and they had those three. The arch on top is 3 courses of brick, but you don't see many of that. Next slide. That's in building 32. Looking at building 29, you see one of the old original archways. There could have been a door in here at one time, maybe a window because of its height. And you see the different building material. Here's your original limestone. You got concrete block up here. Looks like regular concrete, so you got a mix of different materials over the years. Next slide. That's neat. That's the back of building 18. You can only see that from the inside. And that's been sealed up, one of the old doorways. Again, you see that it's 3 courses of brick that they use. That's style. So I'm going on Hershey. I'm trying to. What other building in town? What other thing that has that style support on the doorways and windows? If you go up on Old Bowling Alley Hill, Park Avenue, and go look at the zoo, the old Hershey Laundry Building. It has that identical architectural design. One, boom, 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 3 courses of brick, all in on their side. Okay. Another nice sunset photo. You can see the silos over here, and there's the ramp that connected over to building 38, which brought the cocoa beans over. And if you drive by today, or actually, you know what? You look out that window, if anybody can see, they have just started removing the ramp. That had to be coordinated with Norfolk Southern, so as they removed, the railroad tracks are down below. So they didn't want anything falling on the railroad tracks, and that could be dangerous. So it looks like only the frame, they removed the skin, the concrete platform looks like, and the conveyor system. So just the skeletons left. And that should be going down soon. That's taken off of Mansion Road. There's that big oil tank that sat over there. It's been cut up. It's no longer there. They used to have fuel oil for the powerhouse. They would use natural gas. And in the wintertime, they would use so much natural gas at the powerhouse, they were drawn out from the neighborhood. So they had to have an auxiliary backup. So this is their fuel oil tank. There's the water condensing tank. Not, for milk processing. Next slide, sweetie. And then we'll get into the powerhouses. And that was another question for me. We have the current powerhouse. I actually go to talk to the guys in the powerhouse. I said, "How old is this powerhouse?" Well, I don't know. Didn't it? And people don't know. So I thought, how many powerhouses were there? Well, there's an original powerhouse, which is this. This is one of the boiler rooms that they had. They had a north and south boiler room that were connected. And they had 8 boilers in each boiler room or boiler house. And that must have been a heck of a job. Shoveling in the coal and removing those ashes. No fun. Not at all. But that's in the original, one of the original boiler rooms. Next slide. And then that was the original powerhouse. And then in about 1914, they built another one. It's a monitor style roof, 1, 2, 3. It housed the dynamos. Now, a dynamo means power, but these were pieces of equipment that produced electricity. They looked like giant wagon wheels. They were probably twice as tall as I am. And they had an outer rim which didn't move, and it had magnets in it. And then the inside would spin around, which had brushes on it, on the outside of this wheel, which hit this called a rotor, and you had the outer part called a stator, and this thing would rotate around, and it would produce electricity. What made this thing operate at the old powerhouse were steam engines. Steam engines made this thing spin. They produced alternating and direct current in this piece of equipment. And then when they added the other this secondary powerhouse, they put in an additional smokestack. And those were 150 feet. And this additional one for another boiler room. We added 4 more boilers. It's 200 feet high, and I'm pretty sure they were yellow at the time, or yellowish. Not like the red brick we have now. Next slide. Again, you see 3 smokestacks. That one seems closer. It's just taller. And then you have right here. You have the 2 original smokestacks there. And again, if you look at a lot of these pictures, if you're careful not to detect things, you see those towers that they used to raise concrete at when they were building. And there's a little chute right down there, right down the hopper. This picture's probably, I don't know, about 1909, 1912, something like that. No, I'd have to be after that. Maybe 1914, 1915. Okay, next slide, sweetie. Now, this is the roof of that second powerhouse. It houses those dynamos. Next slide. That gives you a better depiction of 1, 2, 3. Central section for the crane to operate. And they named that Building 28. And when they removed the dynamos from that structure, they used that solely for called the compressor room, for cooling of the chocolate. Next slide. That's inside Building 28. That powerhouse was built in 1914. That's the big one in there. That's a 50-ton crane. It's the biggest one they have or had. And you see the steel trusses on top. And they recently tore that building down. Next slide. I found that was one of the old blueprints, and that's a depiction of the current powerhouse. This architect had an arched window. It ended up being, it's not arched anymore. They put one design that's not arched, it's squared off to the top, but it's an artist rendering. Next slide. There's another depiction. It's not the one they went with. That one, the new powerhouse that's there now, it only has 1 smokestack over 2. That's a cross-sectional view. I'm just intrigued by the first thing about the powerhouse, but that's a cross-sectional view of it. That half is the south half towards Chocolate Avenue, and this is the north half towards here in this direction. And they had on the right side, they had these were new. They didn't use dynamos anymore. They used turbo generators. And steam directly turned the generators. They were a General Electric system that they used. And they had a condensing system for that, and they had their boilers on each side of the big boiler building, and then they had a place on top where they stored the coal. They had a coal bunker. It stored could store 700 tons of coal. And then they had a system where they removed the ashes and go down a chute, and they had a bucket conveyor to remove the ashes out of they weren't shoveling the stuff in anymore. They had a system where they had lorries would weigh the coal exactly, because you had to know how much coal you're putting in, so you knew how much heat you're going to produce. And it had to be exact, because it also get pretty dangerous too. Next slide. And that's the original Edgemore was a company. The Edgemore boilers that they used. I believe the coal went in here. There's the coal bunker on top. These are the stokers on the side. And then the coal would go in here, and the ashes would go down below. Next image. That's actually would have been up on the top of the roof. And those are the conveyor system, the bucket conveyors to move the coal and the ash in the plant. Next slide. Here's a picture of the powerhouse. I couldn't find the exact date when it was built. Probably around 1920. But anyway, you see 1 smokestack instead of 2. They had, they're in a business. They got to get it done, so they do the 1/2 first, get it running, and then get to the other half and get that side running. And next slide. Thank you.
Yeah,
There it is. Now, everybody sees this big section on the back. That's not part of the original powerhouse. That was added, I don't know when it was added. Probably not soon after the original one was completed. That's where the water would be pumped in from that building. You always see that you drive along Mansion Road. That's where the water came in the powerhouse. And they added on the back, because they added at least another boiler. Next slide. That's a neat photo. You see the nice clouds, and there's your powerhouse, both smokestacks. Okay. Obviously, that's smokestacks. They're 250 feet high apiece. Each one of them weighs over 1,200 tons. So what's that? That's roughly what? 2 million? Is it 2 million pounds? 2,000. Okay, next slide. And that's track number 9. It's a siding, and that's where they bring cars who come in. But that's a trestle. That's hollow. And the coal was dumped up top, and it could store about 90 tons of coal. Next slide. But inside is the coal crusher. They would crush the coal. The finer you can make that coal, the more efficient it was. And that's all rusty. That thing, go back in, sweetie. Thank you. That's in that door. You can go in that door, but then you got to step down. And usually that whole thing's flooded with water. So, advance. And so that's the crusher itself. That's the motor that drove it. And this thing crushed 60 tons of coal in an hour. It's amazing. Next slide. That's another image of what's inside the coal bunker. You can see there's water down there. I grabbed a couple pieces of coal that were laying in there to take home, and see how rusty everything is. Next slide. And that's another image on the back. You just don't see it from out the street. Next slide. Now there's the back of the powerhouse. And somehow, I'm not sure, somehow that was open at one time, and they either moved it, I believe they moved the ash, the coal ash, from out top, and they would take it across and load it on cars and get rid of this slide. And then that's on the ground floor of the powerhouse. And there's a staircase that goes down below because the conveyor belt system ran underground. Rather on top, it also ran underground. And there's a hose, probably because they're pumping water out of it. They haven't used it in a while, but it's constantly flooding. I didn't go down inside, but that staircase would take you down into the tunnel where the conveyor belt was. Next slide. And again, this is the ground floor. And I found these tracks, these metal tracks, like little railroad tracks running there. They would have been for the ash hopper that ran on the tracks with 4 wheels, and they would take it to each boiler, and then the ash would come out, and it would go down a chute, and then this panel over here wasn't there. And they'd dump it in there, and it would go down below and get to the conveyor system, the buck conveyor, to get the ash out of the building. And the lighting in there is horrible, but the coal bunker is still there. It's huge. It looks like the bottom of a ship. And it's hard to tell, but it looks like the coal would come out of here when they were loaded on lorries, the weighing lorries. Next slide. That's a coal bunker on the one they added on the east end. I get a view of what a coal bunker looks like. Next slide. And that's the ground level of the first floor. Excuse me. And I'm far from an expert, and I'm pretty sure that's a boiler because they call them tubular boilers. I don't know if anybody knows. I'm pretty sure it's one of the original boilers that was in there. It's still there, and that's all brick, it's all fire brick. And there's a huge combustion chamber. Like if you ever remember having a coal furnace, you load coal in there, and it's pretty decent size in your home. But when you go through those old combustion chambers where they load the coal, they're huge. You can park cars in there. That's how big they were. Next slide. That's on the engine room side of the factory. This again of the powerhouse, and that's where they had the turbo generators were. And then again, you have another. I don't know what the maximum capacity on that, but there's another crane going across. Next slide. Now, that's actually 3 combined images I took. You see, it kind of fits together. That's on, took that on top of building 30. Well, you see what happened. Building 28, the second generation powerhouse, was here. Building 33 was there. You see the concrete. They recycle all that concrete, make use of it. It's actually cost effective to recycle it. And they separate the steel and other debris. And apparently they use magnets to get some of the steel out that they miss. You can't see. That's all. They all recycle that material. And that's building 40, the water tower, 44, the process here, building 29. It's pretty much cleaned out now, and I think that one's next. Building 29 is next to go, and then this one's going to go, and then we'll start working their way east, and then leave building 24 and 25 for last, and they tear it down. Good slide. You see some of the steel they ripped out of there. Took that this past summer. Unique image. Next slide. You see what they've done behind there. That's an old air handler. That's probably the size of a pickup truck sitting there. That's how big that is. And they just rip stuff. They rip it apart and then they separate the materials. I guess it's more efficient that way. It's actually building 26. And one of the guys for Kinsley Construction, he said to me, if you look in the floor, they actually use terracotta. Terracotta is not really a load-bearing material because it's so brittle, but this is a building built by Colonel Wickersham, but he used it in the flooring material, so I guess it worked. And now you get a nice view of the columns. You see how they go all the way up to the top. And you also notice the columns get smaller. Each floor, they're different, they get smaller. They're holding less weight. They don't need to be as big, and plus the columns themselves, their weight. So you want to make them as thin as possible. Next slide. That's the old shipping department. Used to be, there was a wall out here. That's not artificial light. That's actually sunlight coming in. And the wall's being torn down. Shipping department, Hershey Chocolate. That's part of the demolition process. That's in building 33. Taking stuff apart, ripping it apart. Most of the equipment is sold and antiquated. I talked to the guys. I said, why did you move up to West Hershey? He says, it's just not cost effective. All this new modern equipment. He said, the older stuff has so many parts to it that can break down compared to the new stuff. Next slide. Oh, I took this out back. What is that? That's a counterweight to an old elevator room. It was on the back of building 26. And it's probably about, I don't know, it's probably about 10, 11, 12 feet long. And there's a cable system here, and that would connect up to the winch, and you can then connect to the elevator car. Because that way the motor's not lifting the elevator, it's just transferring weight. That's how elevators work. And usually these counterweights run beside the elevator. They have a separate shaft. Next slide. That's at night. You get a field of debris. Obviously around Christmas, you see the kitchen tower with a little Christmas tree on top. Next slide. I thought that was a neat image. That went up in there. The little red pipes took water for the fire suppression system. Next slide. Go back one, sweetie. I just want to say this real quick. You say, why doesn't the building fall over? Normally in a home, your walls, your exterior walls are load-bearing. The way you had the system built, the plant, all the columns were load-bearing. You could take out the floors, the walls, and the roof, but they would stand up. And that way, if you wanted to put an addition, you could just simply tear a wall out. You're not going to affect the integrity of the building. Okay, next slide. This is where Building 28, the second powerhouse, once stood. This is the area of debris. That's Building 18. That's going to remain. Next slide. Oh. That's it. The end. I didn't have any questions that I may or may not be able to answer. Go ahead.
Tom, what happened to the conches? Are they still in there, or are they going to save any of those, or?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. I know they do have the old original conches, the short ones. You know, they had the big long ones because they would call that area longitude because they had the long conches, the long arms. And I do not know what the plans are for the big one. They're huge. They're just huge. Plus they have granite. They're lined with granite. And they have granite rollers. So I don't know what they're...
What did they do with the ashes?
I don't, as far as I know, they hauled them away on rail cars. Besides, I do not, if there's any additional, I don't know.
When was the last building built? What year?
I have a cheat sheet here, let's see. List all the buildings and dates that were built. Oh, that would be what they call Building 45. Now, if you've been in Hershey a long time, you remember they used to have the greenhouse over on Derry Road, and they tore that down. That was about 1960, and they built a building, and that's Building 45. They had so many cocoa beans they needed. They had cocoa beans stored on the side. They even needed more space. They built an extra building to store their cocoa beans. Now it's Building 45, and then later on, that became the building where they processed the cocoa butter. Any other questions?
Are they going to continue using the silos there? It's across the street. That's for shipping and breaking.
Well, Hershey doesn't own the silos anymore.
Yeah.
So.
What's going to be done with them?
They don't know. I'm not sure.
What was the connection to the extraction plant to the factory?
Oh, from what I understood, in the processing of making chocolate, you extract the cocoa butter from the beans. And I believe what they did was they took like waste chocolate, and they would extract, they would press, they had these presses, they would press the cocoa butter out, and then they made, like, they were famous for making their soap, the cocoa butter soap. They also made suppositories, believe it or not, for a period of time. And that building is still, it's empty, and as far as I know, Hershey still owns it. And I guess I read in the paper it might be a nightclub. That was a story about that, but I don't know.
Where's that one at?
Oh, that's, if you go to the extraction plant, what he talks about, it's down the other end of town. You have the car barn off of Chocolate Avenue, it's 1 block off. And there's that other building to the west, this collection of buildings. And that was the extraction plant. Possible. Anything else?
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, and I'm kind of representing Friends of the Hershey Trolley, but the car barn that you just mentioned is basically an exact replica of the central shop that you showed in the early part of your slideshow. So long after this central shop is demolished, hopefully the car barn will still be standing. Here again, it's an exact replica of what you just described.
Yeah, because it has that monitor-style roof and it has that crane that ran the full length of the
with the
building.
pits.
Yeah. Yep. And there's still some original trolley tracks in that building.
Correct.
Yep.
And 2 original trolleys. That's my plug. Forgive me.
Anybody else?
The windowless office building, that had to be a new air conditioning system in there. It had to be pretty early technology. I understood that had a tub roof on, it was flooded with water at one time.
It was purposely flat. And when people say they have a flat roof on their house, they're usually not. There's always a slight slope, because there's usually a drainage system. That's building 41, that was built in the middle 30s. And they purposely made the roof flat to hold water, for insulation.
I believe there was an article done on that right after it was built in Popular Mechanics, because it was a modern windowless office building.
Right. Yeah,
Air conditioning,
because of the air conditioning system, yeah.
like 1938 or something.
That was in
35.
That was David Paul Whitmer who designed that building. It was originally supposed to be an L-shaped building, and MS Hershey said, let's change the shape of it. So that's what the shape we have now. But not many people know this, but on the Chocolate Avenue side, the building we're talking about is all the way at the west end. It's where the clock is, and it's the old main entrance. On the side facing Chocolate Avenue is a clock. But if you're on the back side, on the opposite side, not many people see it, in stone, it says Hershey Chocolate Corporation. And you can only see it from the zoo or from the railroad track. And my grandfather actually helped work on that, my one grandfather. He was a laborer there, and he would dig the trenches for the footings. And those had to be, nice and square. And my grandpa was always proud of that. You'd have right angles so they pour the concrete for the foundation. And then they're still there. I don't know if many people know about it. They work there in this windowless office building. There's these 3 lights. You see them on different locations. And that's original. That was from the weather monitoring system. There's very few windows. They call it windowless, but there's very few. That way people in building 41, in this windowless, knew what the weather was outside. And they could look at the lights, and there was a red light,
Red, green,
Yeah.
and a white.
White.
White. It depends upon which ones were lit up.
snowing.
Yeah, and also apparently the interior walls, they would put exterior images on them originally. They paint on them so that people working inside didn't feel so enclosed. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.